There is a place on this planet where the world keeps its last copy of itself. Not data, not code, not some server farm buried under a mountain somewhere in Utah. Seeds, actual physical seeds, millions of them sealed in foil packets, cataloged by crop type and country of origin, stored at -18 degrees Celsius in a tunnel cut into the permafrost of an Arctic island. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault. You've probably seen pictures. That wedge-shaped concrete entrance jutting out of the mountainside, the fiber optic lights running along the portal like something between a science installation and a monument. It looks like it belongs in a movie. It looks designed to outlast everything. I worked there for 14 months as part of a small facilities and security team. My job was straightforward: environmental monitoring, access control, routine checks of the tunnel systems and storage chambers. Most of the time, nothing happened. That was the whole point. The vault is designed to require as little human intervention as possible. The permafrost does the work. The cold does the work. We were there mostly to watch numbers on screens and make sure doors stayed closed. I'm telling you this because what I experienced in month 11 of my posting is something I have not been able to explain, and I've tried. I've spoken to the other staff members who were there. I've reviewed the environmental logs. I've gone back through every variable I can think of, and I keep arriving at the same conclusion, which is that something happened inside that vault that should not have been possible. Something that the permafrost and the cold and the sealed foil packets and the -18 degrees were supposed to prevent. Something that, as far as I understand biology and physics, cannot happen. The seeds were active, all of them, at the same time, in sub-zero temperatures in the dark, behind 3 sets of locked doors. The seeds in that vault were doing something. And whatever they were doing, it had a sound. If you're new to this channel, welcome to Eerie Atmas X. What we do here is simple. We take the stories that don't make it into official reports, the accounts that get filed under inconclusive and forgotten, and we put them where they belong, in the open. Hit subscribe before we go further, because this one gets into territory that I think a lot of you have been waiting for. This isn't a haunted house. This isn't a ghost in a hallway. This is something older than that. Something that was waiting in the dark long before any of us showed up. Let me tell you about the vault first, because the geography matters. Svalbard is an archipelago in the Arctic Ocean, roughly halfway between the Norwegian mainland and the North Pole. Longyearbyen is the main settlement, a town of a few thousand people, most of them there for mining, research, or tourism. In winter, which is most of the year, the sun doesn't rise. Polar night. Weeks of total darkness, with just the ambient glow of snow and the lights of the town to orient you. If you've never experienced polar night, it's difficult to describe what it does to your sense of time. There's no morning. There's no evening. There's just a uniform dark that sits on everything, and you start to lose the rhythm of days without the sun to mark them. The vault is about 1 kilometer from town, up on the Platberget mountain. You drive up on a gravel road, park in the lot, and walk the last stretch to the entrance on foot. In winter, that walk is into wind that doesn't stop, ever. It comes off the Barents Sea, without anything to interrupt it, and it hits you full in the face. And it's the kind of cold that doesn't feel like cold. After a while, it feels like pressure, like the air is pushing back against you, like it doesn't want you to reach the door. Inside the entrance portal, the temperature rises slightly, maybe -3 or -4 Celsius in the outer corridor. There are 2 sets of blast-proof doors before you reach the main tunnel, which runs about 120 meters back into the mountain. The tunnel slopes slightly downward as you go. The walls are bare rock, reinforced with sprayed concrete in sections. The lighting is industrial, fluorescent strips on the ceiling, motion activated in the storage areas. The sound in the tunnel is a very particular kind of silence. Not the silence of an empty room. The silence of a space that has never had anything in it but cold and rock and dark. When you speak inside the tunnel, your voice sounds wrong, flat, like the walls are absorbing it. At the far end of the main tunnel are 3 vaults, 3 separate chambers, each one sealed with its own door, each one holding its own collection of seed samples from different depositing countries and institutions. As of the time I was working there, the total seed count was somewhere above 1 million distinct varieties, each variety in its own sealed packet, each packet in its own box, each box on its own shelf, organized by country of origin, organized by crop type, organized by the kind of careful, methodical archival logic that you develop when you're building something meant to outlast civilization. My daily routine was this. I would arrive at the vault around 7 in the morning, which in winter meant arriving in total darkness. I would sign in at the monitoring station at the entrance, check the environmental readouts, temperature, humidity, CO2 levels inside each chamber, and log anything outside normal parameters. Then I would do a physical walk of the main tunnel, checking the door seals on each vault, checking the drainage channels that run along the base of the walls, checking the emergency lighting and the communication systems. The whole walk took about 40 minutes if I did it thoroughly. Then I would return to the monitoring station, file my report, and spend the rest of my shift watching the screens. Nothing about this job was dramatic. I want to be completely honest about that. Most days I sat in a room and watched numbers that didn't change. The tunnel was quiet. The seeds were cold. The doors were sealed. The permafrost did its job. The most excitement I had in the first 10 months was when a humidity sensor in Vault 2 threw a false alert at 2 in the morning, and I had to go check it in person. It was a sensor malfunction. I replaced the unit and logged it and went back to the monitoring station and drank bad coffee and watched the screens until my shift ended. Month 11 began the same way all the others had. I came in. I checked the readings. I walked the tunnel. I filed my report. The numbers were normal. The doors were sealed. The cold was doing its job. The first thing I noticed that was wrong was the temperature. Differential. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a spike or a crash. It was a fraction of a degree. The internal temperature in Vault 3 was reading at negative 17.8 instead of negative 18.0. Within tolerance, within the range of normal variation that the system logs as acceptable. I noted it and moved on. The next morning, it was negative 17.6. The morning after that, negative 17.4, still within tolerance, still flagged as acceptable by the system. But I was watching it now. I noted it in my personal log, not the official log, my own notebook that I kept at the monitoring station. I wrote down the readings each morning. Vault 3, temperature, trending upward. Fraction by fraction, day by day. By the end of the first week of month 11, the temperature in Vault 3 was reading at negative 16.9. That crossed the lower threshold of the acceptable range. I filed it in the official log. I sent an email to the facilities coordinator in Longyearbyen. The response came back the same day. The variance was within the seasonal adjustment window. The insulation in the mountain was responding to the early winter temperature drop outside, and no action was required at this time. Monitor and report if the trend continues. I monitored. The trend continued, and on the 9th day of the anomaly, I went down to Vault 3 to check the physical door seal because I wanted to rule out a breach in the insulation before I escalated further. The tunnel was the same as always. The fluorescent strips came on as I walked. My breath fogged in front of me. The rock walls were their usual gray. The drainage channels were clear. The blast doors at the entrance end were shut. I walked the 120 meters to the vault doors and stopped in front of Vault 3. The door was sealed. The indicator light on the keypad was green, which meant the locking mechanism was engaged. The seal strip around the door frame showed no visible gaps. Everything was as it should be, but the door was warm, not warm like a hand. Not warm like a heated surface, but warm in the way that tells you something on the other side is warmer than it should be. I put my palm flat against the steel and held it there. The metal was a few degrees above what it should have been. Not enough to set off an alarm. Enough to feel wrong to a person who had been putting their hand on that door every morning for 10 months. I stood there for a moment in the tunnel. My breath was fogging. The fluorescent light was doing its thing overhead, that faint flicker that fluorescent lights do in cold environments. The drainage channel near my feet had a thin trickle of meltwater moving through it, which was wrong, because the channel was supposed to be dry in winter. Not a flood, a trickle, like something was producing just enough warmth to create just enough melt. I went back to the monitoring station. I sent another email. This time I attached my personal log with the temperature readings. This time I specifically used the phrase, anomalous heat signature at the door surface, and asked for a physical inspection by a qualified engineer. The response came back 3 hours later. The facilities coordinator thanked me for my diligence. She said an engineer would be scheduled for the following week. She said in the meantime I should continue monitoring and log any further variants. That night, I was on a split shift, monitoring station until midnight. I heard it for the first time. I want to be careful about how I describe this, because I've gone back and forth on it many times and I don't want to overstate it or understate it. What I heard was not loud. It was not alarming in the way that a sudden noise is alarming. It was the kind of sound that you notice after the fact, the kind that you realize has been going on for a while, before it breaks through your conscious. Attention. It was a pulse, low, rhythmic, coming. From the direction of the tunnel. My first thought was mechanical. A pump cycling, a compressor kicking in. The vault systems have various pieces of equipment that run on timers, and the sounds do travel through the rock. I checked the equipment log on my screen. Nothing was scheduled to run. I checked the compressor status. It was idle. I checked the drainage pump. Also idle. The pulse continued. Slow and steady. Maybe one beat every 2 seconds. Not a sound so much as a vibration in the air, something you felt in your chest more than you heard with your ears. I walked to the entrance of the tunnel, stood at the threshold where the monitoring station corridor meets the main tunnel. Listened. It was coming from deeper in. From the direction of the vaults, I told myself it was pipes. I told myself it was some resonance effect from the wind outside interacting with the tunnel geometry. I told myself there was a rational explanation. I went back to my station. I logged the time and the observation. 1 sentence. Audible low-frequency pulsing, origin uncertain, duration ongoing. By the time my shift ended at midnight, it had been going for 4 hours. I didn't sleep well. I came back in the next morning, and the first thing I did was check the temperature log for the night. Vault 3 had climbed another 0.2 of a degree. Negative 16.7 now. The system had flagged it automatically and generated an alert that had gone to the facilities coordinator. She had acknowledged it. No further action noted. I walked the tunnel. When I reached the midpoint, about 60 meters in, I stopped, because the pulse was audible again, even in the morning, even in the shift noise of the ventilation system and the hum of the monitoring equipment behind me. That same low rhythm, patient, steady, coming from the far end of the tunnel where the vault doors were. I kept walking. I reached Vault 3. I put my hand on the door. Warmer than yesterday, and now there was something else. A texture to the warmth. Not steady heat radiating from a surface. Something more like I have struggled with this description, and I keep coming back to the same word, breathing. The warmth came in intervals that matched the pulse I'd been hearing. A slight increase, a slight decrease, increase, decrease. In that same slow, 2-second rhythm, I stood in front of that door for a long time. My notebook was in my hand. I had been about to write down the temperature observation, and I was standing there with my pen against the page, and I was not writing anything because I was trying to process what I was feeling through my palm. The seeds in that vault are stored in sealed foil packets. Each packet is heat-sealed, nitrogen-flushed, and designed to prevent any moisture or gas exchange with the outside environment. They are dormant. Dormant means not alive in any active sense, not consuming resources, not producing heat, not metabolizing. They are preserved biological material in a state as close to suspended animation as nature allows. At -18 degrees Celsius, the enzymatic activity that defines life is so suppressed as to be effectively zero at -16.7 degrees Celsius. In theory, that suppression is still nearly total in theory. I went back to the monitoring station. I called the facilities coordinator directly, which I had not done before. I had been sending emails. She picked up after 3 rings. I told her I needed an engineer on site today. Not next week, today. I told her I was detecting what felt like rhythmic heat variance at the vault 3-door surface, and I was logging an audible anomaly in the tunnel. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked me if I was feeling all right. I told her I was fine and that I was describing what I was observing. She said she would make some calls and get back to me. She called back 2 hours later. The engineer couldn't come until Thursday. 3 days. She said the temperature variance was still within the range that the system didn't classify as critical. She said the audible anomaly was likely a resonance effect from the new weather pattern coming in off the sea, and that these things happened occasionally in tunnel structures. She asked me again if I was doing okay, if the polar night was getting to me. She said it got to people sometimes, especially in month 10 or 11. I told her I was fine. I was not fine. That night, I sat in the monitoring station and listened to the pulse, and I did something I hadn't done in 10 months of working there. I pulled up the full schematic of the seed storage system, and I read through the biological protocols. I read about dormancy. I read about the temperature thresholds below which germination is impossible. I read about the mechanisms by which seeds remain viable over centuries, the drying, the sealing, the cold. I read about what happens when those conditions are disturbed. Germination requires 3 things: moisture, warmth, and time. At -18 degrees, moisture is locked. Warmth is absent. Time is effectively paused. But at -16.7, approaching -16, there is a threshold where certain seed varieties begin to register what biologists call priming. Not germination, not growth, but a kind of readiness, a biological awakening of the systems that precede growth, an activation of the metabolic machinery that waits for the signal to proceed. Priming produces heat. Metabolic activity produces heat. And metabolic activity, even suppressed metabolic activity, has a rhythm, a pulse, the rhythm of a living thing doing what living things do, which is to persist. I sat with that for a long time. I told myself it couldn't be that. I told myself the temperature wasn't high enough. The conditions weren't right. The foil packets would prevent any moisture transfer, even if the temperature were rising. I told myself I was doing what the facilities coordinator had implied I was doing, which was letting the polar night get into my head. And then the pulse changed. It had been a steady 2-second rhythm for 2 days, slow, uniform, like a single heartbeat governing the whole space. And then, around 10 o'clock on the second night, it shifted. It became layered. Multiple rhythms at different intervals, overlapping, like different sections of the vault were operating at different tempos, like different varieties of seeds had different timing, different rates, different biological clocks, and they were all running at once, and together they produced something that was no longer a simple pulse, but a complex, living texture of sound. I have a recording. I made it on my phone, sitting in the tunnel with the device held toward the vault doors. I've listened to it many times. It doesn't fully capture what I heard in person because the low-frequency component doesn't reproduce well through phone speakers. But it's there, and if you know what you're listening for, you can hear it. I have not shared this recording publicly. I want to be clear about that. I've shared it with 2 people, a biologist friend who studies seed physiology, and a sound engineer who does acoustic analysis work. The biologist said the frequency profile was consistent with, and I'm quoting her directly here, large-scale synchronized biological activity. The sound engineer said the layered rhythm pattern was not consistent with any mechanical source he could identify. On Thursday, the engineer arrived. He was thorough and professional. He checked the door seals, the insulation, the drainage systems, the temperature sensors. He found nothing mechanically wrong. His conclusion was that the temperature variance was being caused by a change in the thermal dynamics of the surrounding permafrost, which was consistent with regional temperature trends he had been monitoring across multiple Arctic sites. The insulation, he said, would need to be reviewed in the spring. He did not go inside Vault 3. The protocol for entering an active storage chamber requires a minimum of 3 authorized personnel, plus advance notification to the depositing institutions, and assembling that team would take weeks. He left. The temperature in Vault 3 continued to rise. By the end of month 11, it was reading at negative 15.8. I put in my resignation on the last day of that month. My contract had 3 months remaining. I cited personal reasons. The organization accepted it without pushing back, which I have thought about many times since. They didn't ask why. They didn't push back on the lost contract time. They just processed the paperwork and arranged my departure. I left Svalbard in early December. On my last walk through the tunnel, my final check before my replacement arrived, I stood in front of Vault 3 one more time. I put my hand on the door. It was the warmest it had ever been, and the pulse, the layered, complex, multi-tempo pulse of whatever was happening inside that chamber, was the loudest I had heard it. Not loud in absolute terms, but present, insistent, like something pressing against the other side of the door, like something that had been building to this for weeks, working its way up through the fractions of a degree, through the layers of foil and the sealed boxes and the cataloged samples, toward the door, toward the warmth, toward something it sensed on the other side. I took my hand off the door. I turned around. I walked the 120 meters back to the entrance. I signed out for the last time. I got in the car and drove down to Longyearbyen in the dark. Here is what I want to leave you with. Not the sound, though the sound stays with me. Not the warmth on the door, though I can still feel it when I think about it. What I want to leave you with is this. This Svalbard Global Seed Vault holds over 1 million distinct seed varieties. The whole point of it, the entire reason it exists, is that those seeds are alive. Not active, dormant, but alive. Preserved life. Life waiting for the conditions that will allow it to proceed. And life, as anyone who has ever tried to stop it will tell you, finds a way to proceed. That's not mysticism. That's biology. That's the fundamental drive that is encoded into every living thing that has ever existed on this planet. 1 million varieties of life, sitting in the dark at the top of the world, waiting. I don't know what they were waiting for. I don't know what they sensed that made them start. I don't know what the current temperature in Vault 3 is because I no longer have access to the monitoring system. I've checked the public data that the organization releases periodically, and the numbers are within normal parameters, which either means the trend reversed after I left, or it means the public data is not the same as the internal data. I've thought about what it would mean if it continued. If the temperature kept climbing, fraction by fraction, degree by degree, if the priming became germination, if the foil packets, which are strong but not infinitely strong, began to give, if 1 million varieties of seeds, selected precisely because they are the most resilient, the most adaptive, the most persistent forms of plant life on Earth, if they were given warmth and moisture and time, the vault is built to outlast everything, to be the thing that remains when everything else is gone. I wonder sometimes if the seeds know that, if something in them, some distributed, biological intelligence encoded in the structure of 1 million different kinds of life, understands what they are and what they're for and what it would mean to begin. I wonder if what I heard in the tunnel in the dark in month 11 was a beginning. If this account found you and you've been to Svalbard, or if you've worked in cold storage facilities and heard something you couldn't explain, I want to know about it. Put it in the comments. This community is built on exactly these kinds of accounts. The things that don't have official explanations, the things that get filed and forgotten. If you experienced something, share it. You're not alone, Dot, and if you've been watching Eerie Atmos X for a while, you know that we take these accounts seriously. We don't sensationalize. We don't add things that weren't there. We take what happened and we put it in front of you exactly as it was. Share this one if it reached you, because this is the kind of story that deserves more than an algorithm. This is the kind of story that should travel. Pass it on, Dot. Something is waking up in the dark. I don't know when. I don't know what happens when it does. But I know what I felt through that door. And I know that the world built that vault to hold its future. I just didn't know the future would be so impatient.